The first incident, which happened before Godzilla, was when I was very young. I shared a room with my sister. I was startled awake but didn't know why. I looked over at my sister, who was sound asleep, and immediately realised what woke me up. Something was scratching at my window, but not normal scratching. It was almost like when someone is keying a car. The scratching ran along my windows as if someone was walking with a key against it. Problem is, my windows were high up, and it would take a 7-foot-tall person to do it. I was shocked it didn't wake my sister. I remember being so scared that I couldn't move. The keying of the windows proceeded down to each window of each room of the house, and incredibly, I could hear it the whole time. My brother's room, he didn't wake up. The bathrooms, living room, etc. It finally ended at my parents' room. There, finally, I heard my mother mutter something to my dad. Couldn't understand what she said, but they went back to sleep immediately. Surprisingly, I fell back to sleep also and never mentioned it again. So many little things happened before I became an adult. My sister and I spotted something strange in the sky in broad daylight, and no one else noticed. A giant doll of mine ended up in weird places, as if she walked. My cat is always sensing movement at the same time as me, out of the corner of my eye. So many things. Half are just a blur with time. But as I grew up and they kept happening, my adult memories of newer incidents are far sharper in my brain. Not much happened in my teen or early adult years. I was so busy with school, marriage, and building a life that I forgot about it. Until one day. A reminder of my past experiences. We just bought a house. My husband and I were fighting about it, if he shouldn't play golf the next day or not. I didn't want him to, but he wasn't having it. We laid down in our tiny house to go to sleep, and all of a sudden, we heard this loud crash. We ran out to the living room, and what did we see? His golf clubs were strewn everywhere. It looked like someone had picked them up and threw them across the room. Guess someone or something was on my side of the argument. I let him play anyway. One night my husband and I were woken by a popping sound and something falling on the floor. Lots of somethings, in fact. We ran towards the noise and noticed in the kitchen that the plastic cups drying in the rack were popping out of their holding position and falling on the floor, right before our eyes. Not dishes, not silverware or anything else, just cups, and it didn't stop until the last one fell. A few weeks, maybe a month later, I was awoken by my 2 pugs barking. I figured there was an animal outside nearby, so I got up. Hubby was still asleep. I noticed the direction they were barking, and again, it was my kitchen. This time, the loaf of bread that was sitting on the counter was floating a few inches above. Then it dropped to the ground and was hard enough to damage it. Now, all of these things, including the golf clubs, might not be that exciting, but the incidents always followed an argument about said objects with my husband. You already know the backstory of the golf clubs, but the cups argument was my husband telling me before we went to bed that we should put the dishes away. I asked him why and what could really happen to them if we waited till morning. The bread, I yelled at him to put it back in the fridge and he forgot. Was something trying to put a wedge between us? I don't know. I'm sure a few things that I can't remember happened in the next year or so, but the next incident that sticks in my mind was when I was around 8 months pregnant with my firstborn. My husband wasn't home, and it was around 9 or 10 p.m. I was watching TV with my dogs in my recliner. My male dog would never leave my side when I was pregnant. All of a sudden, the male starts growling at the room where the nursery is set up. It's dark in there. He keeps growling, and now my female starts barking. I start getting a weird feeling in my stomach. A deep, weird feeling in the pit of it. Then, the baby started moving more than usual. This went on for a bit, and I was so scared that I just sat there and stared at that room. As quick as it all started, it was even quicker when it stopped. I called my husband and asked him to come home. He did because he could tell by my voice that something else happened. The rest of my pregnancy was uneventful. The day comes when we bring my son home. No problems until about 2 months in. I start to notice a pattern with my son and him waking up at exactly 3:23 a.m. every night. He had a baby monitor in his room, and I would wake to his giggles and laughter. Now you're probably thinking that's so much better than waking up to screaming and crying, but it wasn't. You see, I start to realize that the giggling and laughter sounds familiar. It sounds just like when someone he knows is peeking over his crib and making him laugh. Once I realize this, I start running to the room, and as soon as I turn on his light and run to his crib, I notice him laughing and looking in another direction than where I'm standing. He kept laughing and cooing in that direction until I startled him with my voice. Then he looks at me and smiles or cries, depending on what he wants. This went on for a while, even when I started leaving his light on. I even tried having him sleep with us, but he just wasn't comfortable with that. I figured he liked whoever was visiting him and meant him no harm. It slowed down and stopped completely once he was in his first big boy bed. Once he started talking, he was able to tell me if anything was happening. I'd find him in his room with his toys laughing and smiling at the window. I asked him why he was laughing, and he would point to the window and say the man was funny. What man? I asked. The man in the window. It was scary enough that he possibly saw a man in the window, but what was scarier is that it was the second floor of my house. There's no way a man could be up there. This happened often, but again, he seemed happy with the man in the window. Until I had my daughter. Unfortunately, it was a different situation for my daughter. Once she started sleeping in the nursery, she started waking up at the same time every night, 3:23 a.m. But she wouldn't laugh. She would cry. With this, I put her back in our room for another year until she was ready for her own bed. Once that happened, it was uneventful for a year or so. One night when I was in the kitchen cooking, hubby wasn't home yet, I heard my daughter crying and saying, "Go away." I ran in and asked her what was wrong. All she could do was point to the window, but her brother, who was in there too, said that the man was back and he didn't like my daughter. Well, from then on, I told my daughter to play in the living room near me, so the man would leave her alone. A few years went by. A few things happened, but not bad. We ended up selling that house and moving into a bigger one. All was well with the kids. Nothing else happened to them, and they're adults now. Although I do notice that my son has a lot of interest in paranormal stuff. But it seemed, whatever it was not done with me. From about 2001 on, every time someone close to me died, I would get a visit from them within a week after their death. Sometimes they'd say something and sometimes not. It was always right before I fell asleep. My dad was one of them. A few days after he died, he visited me. He looked into my bedroom and smiled. I asked how he was feeling because he was in so much pain before he died. He simply waved his hands down his body and gave me thumbs up, which I took as he was feeling good. Others visited, and I was honest with my whole family and told them when it happened. Friends, pets, and my mother-in-law, she kept turning the whole light on, which would she do when she was alive, did the same. But my mom didn't. About 2 months later, my sister and I were cleaning out my mom's house. She asked if my mom visited me after dying. I said no and told her that it bothered me. Was she mad? Did I do something? My sister told me that she probably just wasn't ready to contact me. Well, I got home later that night, and Mom felt it was time. My husband and I were watching TV, and we started listening to music, like from a music box. It was coming from my china cabinet. I walked over and realized that my very old music box that my mother had given to me when I was a child was playing music. What's strange is that it hadn't worked for many, many years. I cherished that music box because it was a gift from my mom. She knew I loved it, and I really believed that was her way of saying goodbye to me. The visitations still happen, but not often. I still see movement out of the side of my eye, but it's slowed down along with all other paranormal activity. Around a week ago, I had a dream. And since it's been a week already, I cannot recall the exact events, but what I can unearth is vivid. It was set in a very different place, a place that looks dystopian, and I was running away from what seems to be a governing entity of the area, a group of men, just like how FBI agents chase fugitives, that kind of vibe. I was running with a girl. We climbed on top of several overhead railings, parkour style, until we perched on a high ledge overlooking a pair of railroad tracks. At that point, I can feel the overwhelming dread. The girl looked at me and said, "The only way to get out of here is to jump when the train comes." I nodded, and just a few moments later, a huge train came roaring our way. I jumped, but was shocked to realize I'd jumped prematurely, and I was about to get hit by the train. I just closed my eyes as the train's front lights blinded me, and then puff! I woke up, gasping for air. I went out of my room and sat on a chair, trying to make sense of that dream. The last events were too real, not to mention the timing for it to be a dream. I'm not sure if I was supposed to die so we can get out of here, like the girl said. Or we were supposed to get on top of the train to get away, but we failed. But then again, I have no way of knowing. I don't remember seeing the girl jump either. Fast forward to today, October 25th, 3 p.m. in the Philippines, or 3 a.m. Eastern Time. I was walking out of my room, greatly bothered, because I had a redo of that same dream, but with a different scenario. Same dystopian setting. I know it's the same because I saw the exact street island and the same group of men running toward me, and the fear of being caught feeling was taking over. To make the long story short, I got caught, but the people who caught me were surprisingly gentle. Didn't torture me or anything like that. They just contained me and led me into a huge room with lots of bunker beds. I was imprisoned along with other people who don't look like criminals at all. Most of them are girls, and the men were very gentle too. And that brought me a feeling of security, almost like it made me happy at that moment. Everyone was wearing a uniform with a light shade of brown. A warden came in and announced, "We have a new member. Please introduce yourself." I mentioned my name, and I joked a little bit and ended with me rapping to another inmate beatboxing. Everyone was having a good time. Then lights out, I pretended to be asleep because I was planning to escape and look for the girl in the past dream so I can get answers. I was excited for that because I might prove something here. As I was fake sleeping, waiting for the right hour, someone or something stood beside my bed and stabbed me in the chest, and poof, I woke up gasping for air. I walked out of my room and I saw my mom watching a video of the 3 o'clock prayer. I looked at the clock and it was exactly 3 p.m. I need thoughts on this. The timing and the reason for me snapping out of both dreams was being killed. Felt real for the first time, and now it happened again. I'm convinced it's not a dream. I also have hopes of knowing if someone out there had a similar dream, hence me stating the date and time. So this happened when I was in 8th or 9th grade. My friend and her family had gone on vacation, and she had enlisted me to come over daily and feed and check on her cats. The first couple of days, my mom came with me. Then the third day, my mom went by herself. I was babysitting all day. Then the fourth day, I went by myself. The house was 3 blocks away, so I walked. Now I had been in the house probably 100 times at this point, so I had no reason to be timid or scared. And at first I wasn't. I went in, went around the corner to the kitchen, and switched out the water and gave the cats some fresh food. Then I came back into the living room and snuggled the nice kitty. I say that because their older cat was seriously one of the meanest cats I've ever known. Hated everyone. So I was totally fine with her hiding and not wanting attention. I was about to leave, but then remembered that my friend said I could borrow some books from her room. We were both bookworms. So I went down the narrow hallway to her room real quick and started looking through her bookshelf. This put my back to the doorway. I'd been browsing for a few minutes when very suddenly I felt cold and terrified. I was sure someone was standing in the doorway behind me. It took me several moments, but I finally summoned the courage to turn around. As I looked at the doorway, It was as though someone was just darted out of sight. At this point, I decided to screw the books and noped the hell out of there. I ran out of the room, back down the narrow hallway, into the living room and to the front door. The whole time it felt like someone was behind me. I didn't even turn around until I was outside, and then just to lock the door, and then ran home. I didn't say anything to my mom for a few weeks, but I did make excuses for her to go with me every day after that, until my friend returned. A couple of weeks later, I decided to bring it up to my mom when we were driving somewhere. I thought it could be something to laugh about, like, I freaked out for no reason, silly me. But my mom just got really quiet, turned down the car radio and said, "Honey, the same thing happened to me the day before when I went alone. I didn't say anything to you because I didn't want you to be scared going over there. And I thought it was just my imagination playing tricks on me." Needless to say, my blood ran cold and the experience has stuck with me all these years. Things that might be relevant: the house was built in the early 50s. My friend at the time was into Ouija boards and the like, but never took it seriously. I also found out years later that her mom was emotionally abusing her. So has anyone else experienced anything like this and have theories as to what happened? So I want to preface this by saying this happened a few years ago, with only me and my now ex being the only ones that have witnessed it. I mainly want to put my little encounter out there to see if anyone else has similar stories. And I do remember looking this up a while back, but with no answers. Here's my story. So this happened on a usual weekday. It was nighttime, around 10 or 11, on a summer night. It gets pretty muggy at night in my part of the world, so I like to keep the windows open at night when it's cooler outside. And this was one of those nights. Me and the girlfriend were getting ready to go to bed as usual, for her at this time. But I'd cuddle her till she sleeps, so I can get up and fuck around the house like a cat at 3 AM. As we're in bed, it's pitch black. She likes it dark and quiet. I'm sure fuck don't. And the only light is the street light from outside my window. About only 20 minutes of this, I was kind of in that state where you're dozing off, but not quite about to knock out anytime soon. I also want to clarify that I have sleep problems, and have had the occasional sleep paralysis and hypnagogic imagery since I was 12. So, around this time is when I hear these faint noises that sounded like it's coming from outside. The best way I can explain it is like human vocals singing, making a he noise and then a ha noise. The he noise sounded higher pitched and like a woman, while the ha noise was quite deep and sounded like a man. At first, I chalked it up to my brain making me hear things because of the stage of sleep that I was in. But me being paranoid, I went into caution mode. I opened my eyes and lifted my head up to look towards the window when I was still laying down. The girlfriend noticed this and asked, "What's wrong?" I then responded with, "Did you hear that?" And she said back, "Hear what?" Immediately after she said that, we heard the noise again, but ever so slightly with more volume. The same pitch, but sounded closer than before. That's when we both sat up on the bed, me almost leaping the fuck out in fear. We were both frozen there for a few good seconds, looking at each other with that "the fuck was that" face. Only about 10 seconds after this, the noise came back. Same perfect pitch and length. But let me tell you when I say it was louder. This time it sounded like whatever made the sound was right outside the window. I went into panic mode and jumped out the bed to turn the lights on, while the girlfriend was still in bed because apparently she wasn't shooketh like I was. We both went, "Yo, what the fuck was that? Is that a person?" And just stood frozen for a bit. The sound was back yet again after another 10 seconds, as if it was clockwork, but now fainter than before. This is when I decided now's a good chance to peep out the window to see what kind of alien Slenderman multi-dimensional creature is making the noise. But there's nothing outside. After doing this, I didn't hear it again, and I was afraid it's because whatever it was spotted me and just stopped doing it after that. The girlfriend was sort of just chuckling in disbelief while I was about to poop myself. It took me a while afterwards to feel comfortable enough to keep my window open, let alone sleep without the TV on. But that was the only and one time this has ever happened to me. We hadn't had an experience in a couple of months. I thought that maybe it moved on finally. That's not the case. I've been feeling super uneasy and unsafe in my house, especially at night. I guess for good reason. 2 nights ago, I heard a young girl screaming from my parents' bedroom. I stood there, trying to figure out what to do. I was home alone. Soon after, music started playing. I thought maybe it was my phone, but it wasn't. I never found the source of the music. My parents soon arrived home, and I left the bathroom. I'd locked myself in there. Probably about 5 nights ago, I had a dream about a demonic young boy. He was like dimmed grey and black. Even his skin was grey and black. He was wearing old, worn-out clothes and had bright, glowing yellow eyes. I saw him walking up the stairs towards me in my dream. The lights flickered around us. I screamed at him in the name of Jesus to leave me alone, and he did. He disappeared into thin air. I woke up around 5, totally petrified from the dream, because it felt so real. I checked my phone to see it was around 5. I felt like I was being watched, so I just sat there for a bit. I had no idea what was going on outside of my room. In the living room, my sister and mother were sleeping. My sister explained to me that she woke up and felt something grabbing her ankles and was terrified. She had a blanket covering her face mostly, so she couldn't see everything, but she said she did have a hole in the blanket where she saw exactly what was grabbing her. She said she saw a little girl with long black hair, a deformed, rotting face and a white dress. No eyes. She said she closed her eyes because she was too afraid to look at it anymore. Then she woke up again. She said she never remembered going back to sleep, but she woke up again and she knew that she was awake the other time, so she was confused. She then saw the little girl for the second time standing in the living room. Then the little girl ran into the kitchen, back and forth before she disappeared. My sister checked the time she woke up for the second time, around 5 o'clock. Was this a coincidence? Both waking up at 5 o'clock? Could be, but I feel like it wasn't. My sister said that sometimes the ottoman in the living room where her feet are shakes violently sometimes, and that it wasn't the first time the little girl was grabbing her feet. A few months ago, she had sleep paralysis, and that was the first time she saw the little girl. She needs a new place to sleep. Obviously, the living room isn't working for her. She had a dream where a bright red light shined from the living room, and when she tried to enter, an angel threw her back and told her, "Do not enter the living room. Not at night." She woke up with the feeling of something watching her. Although I'm worried about her, I'm slightly glad that it's so violent with her and not me, because it was the other way round a little bit ago. I had all this terrifying stuff and she was getting dreams. Now I'm getting dreams and she's having terrifying stuff happen to her. It switched. Maybe it decided after 5 years I needed a break. She's not as strong as I am though. She doesn't know what she's dealing with or how to combat it, really. I grew up learning about paranormal and dealing with experience after experience, but she never did. She just didn't want to know. After she was attacked at the asylum we went to, I feel like maybe things know she's an easy target now. This happened a couple of days ago. My family and I went to an old asylum while on vacation. They had renovated it up a bit and put a couple of stores and a restaurant inside, so my father thought it would be a nice place to visit. Ha! When we first drove into the driveway, I was overcome with dizziness. I couldn't see straight, and I could finish typing the message I had been typing before we pulled in. As I got out of the car, the dizziness subsided for the most part, and we all went inside. It still looked like an asylum. The doors were like metal cage doors. The floor was old and cracked. The walls were old yellowed bricks, and there were entrances that were covered over with more bricks, so no one could enter. As we began walking down the halls, I noticed something was off. The overall feeling in the place was just terrible. I started getting a headache, but it was only minor. I know spirits can give people headaches and stomach aches, so I wasn't surprised. As I said, mine was minor, but I couldn't help but notice that my sister was getting worse and worse. As we continued walking down the hall, we stopped to look at one of the stores. There was an old-looking metal door that resembled something that would be on an animal cage. It was just a pitch-black, empty room on the other side. I had mentioned to my mother the feeling I had about the place, and so as a joke she held me close to the cage and said, "Look in there, do you see a ghost yet?" As they were all laughing, I stood there in shock, for there was someone on the other side of the gate looking back at me. I ripped away from her grasp and kept walking down the hall, away from the cage-like door. My sister was giving me a look, so I knew she wanted to tell me something. We went off the side, and she told me she had a terrible pounding headache. We kept walking as she told me about it, but I could see she was getting worse, like she didn't know where she was going anymore. I took her outside the building for a minute to help her head and told her to pray and imagine a white light around herself. And she did this and started to walk away from the building. Her headache was getting better. My father scheduled for us to eat inside the building, and our table was ready, so we were forced to go back inside. She told me her headache was even worse than before, and that she was about to pass out, and that the praying and white light now made it worse. We were texting each other, and she was telling me that she felt a strong pressure on her back and head. Soon enough, I could see she couldn't take it anymore, so I took her outside again. My parents were furious, but only because they didn't understand. Once I took her outside, she started to cry and shake, and so I took her away from the building and we went on a walk. We went across the street and I talked to her about how the Lord was with her. Her headache stopped, and so did the pressure. Our parents texted us, telling us that the food was there, so we again were forced to enter the building. I held her hands and prayed with her before we entered again. We ate as fast as possible and got out even before our parents did. We drove off, but she still felt uneasy, and so did I. We got out of the car at our next destination, but it was almost like we were still in the asylum. My sister started crying and shaking again. She asked me if it could make her kill herself. I asked her why, and she told me that it was giving her suicidal thoughts, and that it was making her depressed and draining her energy. I took her and my mum and dad, and we all prayed together over her. As I placed my hand on her head while praying, it was weird. I could feel it there still. It had followed us there. I thought she would be an easy target. And maybe she would have been if I wasn't there. Maybe that's what scares me the most. I'm not sure if it's gone or not, but when we arrived back at the hotel, I saw and heard someone following me in the hall. So I thought it was my sister, but when I turned around, no one was there. But that could have just been a different spirit. I'm pretty used to them now. Last night, my sister and I didn't sleep. We were kept awake all night. Maybe we were scared, or maybe we were kept up by something else. Something dark. Something inhuman. I guess we'll know soon enough, won't we?
It was morning, maybe 10:30 or something like that. It was very bright outside, but not like a lot of sun like a nice summer day. Kind of cloudy. Made the house look dark. We were late for an appointment, so my mother went out to drive the car up to the door so we could get in and go. We have a rather long driveway. So it was just my sister and I inside the house. She ran to my parents' bathroom to fix her hair, and I stayed in the bathroom off the kitchen. I hadn't had many paranormal experiences for at least a week, and so I was just randomly singing, and then for no reason at all, I just started making up lyrics that weren't in the song. Like, haven't seen you in a while, are you actually real? Yeah, you are, but maybe you should leave. Then I continued and said, go back to hell. After I said it, I knew that was a bad thing to say. Well, I was proven right. Seconds after I felt a breath on my neck, then someone blowing in my ear. Not softly. I turned back and no one was there. but there were two loud knocks on the door. I turned, and before I had said anything, thinking it was my sister telling me it was time to go, a woman's raspy voice said, "No," as if it was saying it wouldn't go back to hell. I opened the door and no one was there. I shut the door and continued to brush my hair. Then I opened the door and I saw my sister come around the corner. "You ready to go?" she said. Then Jay asked her, "Did you knock on the door out there?" She looked at me like, "Are you serious?" "No, we don't have time for this. We have to go." I agreed, and we went out the door. Later that night, I was in the same bathroom, and my dad and sister were picking out a movie to watch. We have like 10,000 movies, so it took them a long time. I heard a knock on the door, and I said, "Hold on, I'm almost out." But then I was curious, so I opened the door anyway, and no one was there. So I closed it and finished, and then walked into the living room. "Did you guys knock on the door?" I asked. "No, we're trying to find a movie," they replied. "You were here the whole time?" "Yes," they clarified. Okay, so it wasn't them, but maybe it was my mom. She knocks on the bathroom door to annoy me sometimes, but she always fesses up if it was her. I walked to her bedroom and she was on her bed sleeping. "Huh?" I said to myself. Well, guess I had another one, as in a paranormal experience. I walked upstairs to take a shower and I started to get undressed. By now, I was wearing only my underclothes. I'd heard something knock on the bathroom door upstairs, which was the bathroom I was in currently. I went to open the door because it likely would have been my sister, but I stopped before I touched the handle. If it were her, I would have heard her come up the stairs and open the door. I didn't hear anyone walking on the stairs, and the door to the stairs didn't open. We have a door downstairs, and when you open it, there's stairs that go upstairs. Our house is old, so the stairs and the door both make a lot of noise. The house was built in the 1880s and just added onto over the years. Then, I thought it was her, the raspy woman. I left the door closed. I said to myself, "Wait, you're so stupid. It was just your cat. Your cat knocks up on the door all the time." Then I stood there thinking about it and went to text my friend. Then I heard someone jumping. On the top step and then on the second to top step, back and forth like they were jumping between the steps for fun. Then I heard something run up to the door. I looked to the bottom and there was a small shadow of where they were. They ran down the hall and up the hall. Of course, I thought nothing of this because my cat does this all the time. Then it ran back up the door. Then back down the hall really fast and into my sister's room. "It's just the cat," I said to myself. I turned around and basically shattered my pants. I had forgotten the sink was on because my cat was drinking from the faucet, and so my cat was in the bathroom with me. But it's watching the door like it heard the same things I did. And I looked at it and went, "Shit." I called my sister and I could hear the TV in the background, which also meant it wasn't her. I said, "Come upstairs." She complained about it at first, but eventually complied. Then I took my shower. I didn't tell her what happened because she knows the house is haunted, but doesn't like me to tell her about what happens to me because it scares her. She's never had experiences to the extent that I have, except once. One time when she was home alone, she heard a woman screaming. She heard it twice, and then she hid in a corner until we got home. Same thing happened to me about a week later. I only heard it once, but the memory will never leave me. It was one of the scariest nights of my life. So she's asked me not to share my stories with her, so I have to share them here. The first one I have is from 2 months ago. I was in my room around 2:30, and the only lights I had on were my fairy lights. I had a feeling I wasn't alone, but I couldn't hear anything. Feeling that it was nice, so I just sat in fear. Then I heard a woman breathing, and then she said, "Psst," and I just ignored it, and sat there until I could feel she left the room. 2 days after I went into the other part of the barn for fun. The barn has a part of the animals and a part for work and machinery. I went into the machinery part. I started hearing a conversation coming from the second floor, so I called out. Then they stopped. Then I heard a huge crash and footsteps going towards the old ladder to get up there. I ran fast. The next time was a week after. I was sleeping on the other side of the house with my sister. We were both up for most of the night, and so this happened, it had just turned 3 a.m. Ironically, I started crawling behind the couch where I was supposed to be sleeping around 2:57, but it picked up at 3 o'clock. I had a terrible feeling. After 5 minutes, the crawling stopped, but then I heard this ungodly growl. I asked my sister if she heard that too. She was in a sectioned part of the room across from where I was, so she couldn't see me. She said she heard it too. Then the feeling got more intense, and I got up to run to her sectioned room thing. When I stood up, I saw a tall, black, bony figure standing hunched over by the door to the outside. I ran to her room and closed the door, but it was still there in the room with us. We called our parents, and they finally made it to the other side of the house, but by the time they came out, it was already gone. 3 weeks later, I went into the barn again, and my friend wanted to tour. She was on FaceTime. I started getting that feeling again, and just as I was going to leave, I heard a dog barking from the next room. I knew very well there wasn't a dog, and whatever it was attempting to lure me over there. So I left. My mother had experiences like this when she was younger, but never like the ones I've had. I have a hard time believing that all 4 houses we've lived in have been haunted. I don't even think it's the houses anymore. I think it's me. They can't sense the spirits usually, and they can't sense if they're good or evil like I can. I see them everywhere I go. Even if the house isn't haunted, they pay me a visit. It's like I attract them to me. I used to think that my house had a portal, but it's just me, isn't it? When I was first born, my parents put me in the nursery, and the nursery became haunted. My brother had terrible nightmares there if he ever tried to sleep in there, but only after I was born did it become my room. It started with her a few days ago. I was in my room in one of the oldest rooms in this old 1880s house. It was about 2 a.m. and I felt this sinking drop. The one I get when someone's there. I froze and waited. Then I clearly heard psst. My heart began to race as I sat there in absolute fear. I couldn't move. Eventually, the sinking feeling subsided and I was left alone in the dark with my fear. She left the room, but she was still there. That was the first encounter. After that, I would have to go feed the animals in the barn every morning. I was hearing footsteps above me on the second floor. There's this hole in the ceiling, above where the cat's food is. I heard someone get on the floor next to the 2x2 hole. I looked over and saw a piece of hair hanging down. I froze and watched as it was pulled back up to the second floor. I ran so fast out of there, it wasn't even funny. I had to go feed the animals by walking through the pasture and going in from the back. After that, I started staying up later. I just couldn't sleep. I felt like something was watching me every night. This was 2 days ago. I was starting to fall asleep. It was only around 12:40, so it wasn't that late. I was almost asleep when I started hearing this children's music from my room. Then I saw the lady pulling me closer and closer until she was right in my face, and I got snapped back to reality. It freaked me out, but I blew it off. I tried falling asleep again. The children's music started and she pulled me closer and closer until she was in my face, and I snapped back to reality again. I tried one more time and the same exact thing happened. I felt my stomach drop. She was behind my door. I was so terrified. I picked up my stuff and ran as fast as I could and went to another room downstairs to try and sleep in. I finally fell asleep around 2:30. I'm not quite sure what she wants with me, and I'm not so sure I want to find out. All I know is that she's here. always around, just waiting. The experience started 5 months after we moved in. We moved in 4 or so years ago. The first time I thought something might be up is when my sister called my mother, and I was terrified. We were on our way home from my orchestra practice. She called, and you could tell she was shaking, but she wouldn't tell us what happened. She just said, "Just please hurry, please come home fast." We drove home to find her sitting in a corner of the living room. We asked her what happened, and she said she'd been watching her TV show on her phone, and then she heard some girl scream, like a teenager scream. She said she thought it was part of her TV show because she was watching Glee. So then she paused her show, and a couple seconds later, she heard it again. A teenage girl screaming bloody murder. I had a hard time imagining that that could actually happen, but I totally believed her. Because before this house, we've lived in 2 other haunted houses, so not new to the paranormal. After that, my mom prayed through the kitchen, living room, and family room. That only made it worse. About a week later, my sister was at basketball practice. I was home alone. I was walking through the kitchen when all of a sudden I stopped. Not even 4 feet away from me, behind a corner, I heard her screaming. But it wasn't a teenager. It was a woman, like early 30s. I froze. I didn't know what to do. So I backed away slowly and hid in the stairwell upstairs. You see, in the dining room, there's a door, and when you open it, it stairs to the upstairs. So I sat on the 3rd step and called my friend like 5 times, but she didn't pick up, so I called my mom. I could barely talk. I just told her she needed to get home as fast as possible. I sat there for 15 minutes until she got home. I didn't even close the door because I didn't want to leave my dog. So I was terrified of the demon, but I wasn't going to abandon my dog, so I watched him. That was 3 years ago, but I can still hear her screaming. About a month later, I was rearranging my room. I was turning, but as I was turning, I saw this little girl in the mirror that looked at me, but her eyes and mouth were blacked out. I said that it was just because I was turning. I didn't realise till later, when I was thinking about her blonde hair and blue shirt, that I wasn't wearing a blue shirt. After I saw her, I turned to see a woman. She was there for a second, but then gone. She looked like she was burned. I knew it was just trying to scare me. She had black tufts of black hair coming out of her head, with skin hanging off her face because she was so badly burned. Bright green eyes and a long white dress. I kept walking. It didn't scare me much. I went downstairs, and that's when I realised that the little girl in the mirror wasn't me. The next day, I was walking my dog. We have this big 1880s dairy barn, so I thought I would explore it with my dog. It was sunny and cool. It was a nice morning for it. I opened the barn door and went in. Dust and old tools were everywhere. I proceeded to walk in further. There was one room that was pitch black. I peeked in and there was nothing but a table. Next to this room was a big, heavy door with a lock. I fidgeted with the lock until it opened. I swung open the big door and it stuck. I guess the hinges were rusty. I went in with my dog and he sniffed around while I explored. There was an old beaten up refrigerator and a bathroom with cobwebs and the toilet a lot with wood, dirt and rocks. Same as the sink, and the windows were broken. Looked like someone threw rocks through the panes for fun. I went and stood next to a big beam in the middle of the room with my dog, and I went on my phone to check my text messages. I didn't have many because I was 11 at the time. I put my phone away and I started to walk towards the door, and it was closed. Huh? I thought I left it open, I said to myself, and I did. It stuck because of the hinges. I pushed and pushed, but it wouldn't open. Just then, I heard big, heavy footsteps on the second floor. I looked up and so did my dog. His hair on his back stood up and he started growling and barking. I told him to shut up and I moved to the back of the room with him. The heavy construction boots followed me wherever I went. There was a small door towards the back of the room, and I pulled the white string and it opened, so me and my dog went into the next room. It was a small rock room, with a hole in the wall that looked into the pitch black room on the other side of the door. I could crawl through there with my dog to escape, I thought, but I dismissed that idea quickly because, no, just no. There was a better option. A door to the outside pasture in the room. I went to the door and turned the handle, but it wouldn't budge. It was jammed. The footsteps were getting closer and there was a hole in the ceiling, so I needed to get out quickly. I ran and kicked the door as hard as I could and it flew open. I ran outside with my dog and didn't even bother to close the door. I looked up at the barn and one of the panels fell sideways. Then I saw a black figure run across it. I know what you're thinking. It was an animal is all, but that's not the case. The second floor of the barn is rotted out. If there was an animal up there, or a person, they would fall right through. I went around the barn until I saw the barn door that I entered through. I was feeling brave, so I went back in to see why the door wouldn't open. It was locked. The padlock was locked. I then ran out of my haunted barn with my dog and went back inside my haunted house. Over time, it got more frequent. I would see shadows, people dressed in old-timey outfits. I even got a couple of Polaroid pictures of them. In one, you can see a woman screaming and starting to disappear. And in the other, you can see a little ball of white light with 2 black dots for eyes. In the last one, I can't say for sure it's paranormal, but it's weird. A room with 13 windows in the middle of a hot summer day. I took a picture of my dog and it's pitch black. I can only see the outline of his body and his glowing red eyes and big mouth and sharp teeth. Next to him is a thick line of orange mist. Again, 13 windows, hot summer day. It was very light there. My mom told me later that she kept checking on us at night because she heard a teenage girl screaming and she thought it was us. But when she got up there, we were never awake. Always happens around 2 or 3 in the morning. It was about 1.5 years in which I decided to tell my mom everything that I had seen. And when I did, I regretted it. We were sitting on the couch in the living room, and I told her everything I had seen. And I started crying because there was a lot of emotion, and I don't know why, but I felt pain and hatred. It was like I was feeling what they felt. She told me that it was okay, and that she would pray, and I said, no, don't you make it worse like last time. She said, how would praying make it worse? I replied, I don't know, and I don't want to find out. She went into the office where I heard the woman screaming, and all of a sudden, I got this really bad feeling. She knelt down to pray, and I told her that she shouldn't do that there. She didn't listen, and she started to pray, and I felt the woman's presence in that corner. I knew that she was here, and she was mad. My mom's eyes popped open. She looked at me concerned, but she kept praying. I started crying silently and walked over to her when she was finished. I told her she shouldn't have done that and that the woman was mad at her. She said that she didn't feel right and that she thinks I'm right, and something didn't like that because the hairs on the back of her neck stood up. We went back over to the couch and I saw in the reflection of the window the burned lady. That's what I call her. Ever since I saw her in my bedroom, that's what I call her. I saw her standing 10 feet away by the TV. I told my mom. Then 2 minutes later, I saw her standing in the reflection again, but she was much closer. She was 4 feet away. I then told my mom again, and then she told me she was tired and that she needed to go to bed. So I turned off the light, and as I turned, I saw a woman in her early 30s, maybe, in a navy blue old-timeish dress staring at me. Her brown hair was in a bun and she was holding her hands. Then she disappeared. I didn't tell my brother about that one. I saw the same woman looking out of the window of my sister's room upstairs a few months ago. I called her Fiona because of the dream I had. Recently, in the last 5 months, sometimes terrifying things happened. I was sleeping in my room upstairs and I heard a woman talking in my room. I was starting to wake up and then I was fully conscious. I was awake, but I couldn't open my eyes until she finished talking. I don't know why. Before I was conscious, I don't know what she said, but once I heard the last couple things she said. Go to hell. Then she said something in a different language. Copperdarnum. My eyes shot open and I sat up quickly. I felt her presence in the room with me. She was still there. I searched up Copperdarnum but got no result in any language. So I think it was demon language, an ancient extinct language. I texted my mom and called her. She was awake already. She said she had a bad dream. I called her and told her what happened, and I told her that it was standing in front of my keyboard staring at me, and that I needed to come downstairs. My mom was sleeping in the living room, as she often does, because my dad snores so loud. I climbed out of bed and jogged out of my room and down the stairs. I can't explain to you how I can see something that didn't reveal itself to me. I just could. I think most humans can. I slept the rest of the night downstairs, and that was that. Later that morning, I was looking for a movie to watch, and I was home alone except for my mom. I heard a man's voice in my kitchen. It didn't say much. All it said was, "Huh?" But it echoed through the whole house. I called my mom, but it was too scared to speak, so she got irritated and hung up. I then heard the medicine fall to the floor there. I stood up and looked behind the corner. Nothing. No one was there, but the medicine was across the kitchen. It had been thrown. I walked through the kitchen because I didn't feel him there anymore, and I told my mom what happened, and she was in her bed trying to sleep, so she wasn't happy that I bothered her. Later that night, she came into the kitchen and said, "Why is my medicine on the floor?" She was sick at the time, so it was like some cold medicine of some kind. I told her the man threw it, so I didn't want to move it because obviously he wanted it on the floor. She rolled her eyes and picked it up and took some, then went back to her room. This next one happened 3 months ago. I was talking well, singing in the bathroom and making up words to the song, and I for some reason said that I wished all the demons here would leave and that it wasn't their house. I knew it was a mistake once it came out of my mouth. Not even 5 seconds later, I felt someone in the room with me, and then someone was blowing in my ear to get me to look at the door. Once I did, there were 2 door-shaking knocks. Then a raspy woman's voice said, "No." It wasn't a quick no, but like, "No." I opened the door as fast as I could, but there was no one there. My sister then came out from my parents' room, so she was like 20 feet away, and she said, "Come on, we've got to go. We're going to be late." I grabbed the keys and we left for our appointment. And I told them what happened and they laughed. Then we all laughed. We're at the point where we've had so many experiences that it's funny. Not so much scares us anymore. 2 weeks after that, my mother and I went into the barn with tweezers, and the barn cat had a tick. So she put the tweezers on the hay table and went to catch the cat. Once we caught her, I told her to hand me the tweezers. She stood up and searched, and she couldn't find them. They weren't there. She picked up the bale and looked underneath it and on top of it and behind it. They weren't there. We looked for the tweezers for 10 minutes straight, and now she was mad. I said, "The ghost probably took them. You should ask for them back." But I said that as a joke. She then shouted, "Please give me back my tweezers." A couple minutes later, she went to sit back down, and there they were, on top of the table. We looked at each other and both said in unison, "Thank you." But when she picked them up, they were bent, so we couldn't use them anyway. Literally bent. We just went back inside and got a new set of tweezers and removed the tick later that day. When I play my piano, I'll get the scent of a woman's perfume next to me for a couple minutes. Then it's gone. Like she's coming to listen to me and play. And that doesn't bother me. It was the last time when I smelled rotten flesh behind me. I didn't dare look because I was too afraid, but then it started tapping in my chair and I could feel it. It was crawling under my chair. I jumped up and left because nope. I still see shadows from time to time, and the people still listen to me play the piano. As long as it's the woman, it's okay, because I know that she really enjoys it. Last thing, I play very complicated piano pieces that are scary and sad at the same time. You might think this is not weird, but I don't play the piano, and I can't read the music. And the music that I play is never, ever happy. When I was younger, around 4 to 6, we lived in my grandparents' house while we searched for an apartment. I can't pin this exactly on the paranormal, but I think it was because what are the odds? My sister and I shared a room, and every night I woke up from 3:11 to 3:17 with a dead laybug smashed under my neck. I remember it because it was every single night for the whole 3 years I lived there. And every night they would be walking up and down the hallway. It would walk into each room like it was checking to make sure everything was okay. It was just plain odd. Now, I was super young, so I didn't think anything of it, but as I got older, I realised that wasn't normal. Now, you might think that's not bad, and really after everything I've been through, it's not. But these next stories are much worse. After we moved out, we would visit occasionally, and I would play the piano at her house. Now, my mother used to see a woman there in the house when she was a child, and I believe that I can feel that same woman there with me. This only happens when I'm alone, but it doesn't change how scary it is. I'll play the piano. About 5 to 10 minutes in, I'll hear a shuffle upstairs, then slow, heavy steps coming down the stairs, one by one, until she steps to the bottom of the stairs. She comes up behind me, but then I feel like she's harmful. It's weird. I know this sounds crazy, but it's like a game. The faster I play, the faster she comes down the stairs, and I have to turn around when she gets too close, so she goes back further. One day, I was at her house alone and I was playing the piano. I could feel the woman near, so I said aloud, "Hello, missus." I then started to play. 1 minute later, I felt this really scary feeling come over me, and I stopped playing. As I did, I heard the woman whisper in my ear, "Hi." I turned and no one was there. Then as I went to turn back towards the piano, I saw her face in the reflection of the window behind me. That's when I knew it was really bad. I ran to the kitchen, which was 10 steps away. Then I stopped and I looked back to where I saw her and I said to myself, "Don't run. Don't show your fear. That's what it wants." So I sat down at the table. I started to play this little psychic game, like a matching game or whatever, and I felt this feeling again. This overwhelming fear. Then my heel started to tingle. Over the span of 15 seconds, I could feel this intense pressure on my heel, like someone squishing it, and then I said aloud, "Stop." Then the pressure stopped. Then it bit me. I screamed and turned and remembered to not show fear, so I said, "I guess I'll just see you guys later. Bye." And I ran out of there really quick. I looked down at my heel, but there were no marks or signs of being bitten, but it still hurts. I know what it was. It was a pair of human teeth. So now when I play the piano, I make sure that she stays far, far away. Not today, Satan. I've only lived in 3 houses my entire life. All 3 were haunted. I was starting to think it was a coincidence, but maybe she's just following me wherever I go. The experiences differ, like different kind of ghosts, but I can't help but think it's her. I'll be telling you today about the second house I lived in. It was an apartment in a pretty big apartment complex with lots of land. There was this trail that after walking past the apartments and storage places, you could see a path. After following the path on both sides, you have a cornfield and a forest. We used to play there in the summer. My sister and I would run around in the cornfield away from my father, and he would try to find us. It was a perfectly normal game. I remember one time though, I was running through the corn and I stopped. I thought I heard breathing, so I started to move slowly the other way, and then stopped to see if I could hear it again. I didn't hear the breathing, but I saw the corn moving, and I could hear it too. I naturally thought it was my father, so I ran. I kept doing this for 10 minutes straight until I ran out of the cornfield and heard my dad shouting from the opposite direction of where I thought he was. I went over there and my sister was with him. "Where were you?" he asked. He was irritated. Apparently, he'd been yelling at me. But I didn't hear a thing. I told him I had forgotten my shoes. I'm in the cornfield, but he wouldn't let me go back. I guess it didn't hit me until later that whatever was chasing me around in that cornfield wasn't my dad or my sister. I was completely alone. This next one happened pretty much every night after I had my own room. I was about 7 at the time when this started. I had just gotten my own room and I was happy about it. But not at night. There was this closet in my room. It was super creepy and always scared me, but I never used it. It was hard for me to fall asleep, but I did it, eventually. It was the morning that was scary. I woke up and all my stuffed animals that I had on top of me were on the other side of the couch, were on the ground. But in a perfect circle around my bed. I instantly thought it was my mother that did it. My mother never played pranks on us because she grew up in a haunted house and didn't want to scare us. And if she did do it, she would have confessed. I then went to go ask my dad, but he was asleep. I peeked in my sister's room and she was asleep too. So I waited for them to wake up. They both denied. The next night, the same thing happened. I woke up to the stuffed animals all staring at me, a perfect circle around my bed. Same thing, I asked, who did it? No one confessed. After a week of that happening, I begged them to tell me if it was them, but I knew it wasn't. No one confessed. This continued for 6 years until we moved out, every morning. In that house, there were some scary things. I knew that there was someone else there, even at my young age. I would sleepwalk, and I don't do that now. It stopped once we moved. I used to walk down the stairs and sleep on the couch in the pitch-black living room at night. I even talked to my mom when this happened sometimes. Usually, she'd ask if I was okay, and I would tell her that I was just fine. But I don't remember any of that. I just remember waking up on the couch. Just to preface, I've had many encounters throughout my life, especially as a child. I've not had any experiences for over 4 years, until 3 days ago. There have been many issues in my family, severely affecting me. My younger siblings and my dad, which is causing a lot of strife and pain. I recently rented a room at my cousin's place. A few days after moving in, I woke up, and maybe it was a dream, to a person standing in the corner saying they were sorry. I keep the door locked as there's a person living in the room across the hallway. I don't usually remember my dreams. I thought to myself that I would like a nightmare every so often in order to feel something that wasn't sadness or indifference in my life. This particular night, I would wake up for a second, adjust myself, and go back to sleep. This happened 4 times. The last time, I saw a masculine figure in the dark. It had an unnerving grin and began to whisper a certain word, which I do not remember, with a slight lisp. I remember waking up soon after with a strange feeling and a slight tinge of fear. I sleep with my television at the foot of my bed to watch movies and play video games while laying down. The head of my bed is to the left of a window. There was a little light so that I could not see my reflection on the TV screen. The donut was black except for where the window was, which was white. I stared into my black TV screen for a few seconds, thinking about what occurred when I saw a roundish shape, shadow like a head when the light was. I stared at the shadow thinking it was my head. I had just woken up and I was taken aback by my dream, so I wasn't all there. I guess whatever that shadow belonged to noticed I was staring at its reflection and just vanished. That's when I froze. The round shape wasn't there anymore, so I stuck out my arm as far as it went until it showed up on my screen. That's when I confirmed that it truly wasn't my shadow. I instantly had the urge to take a huge dump, which happens whenever I'm super nervous or afraid, and I ran out of the room to use the restroom and stayed fixed on the toilet for an hour, trying to take everything in. This has never happened to me before. I've seen solid apparitions before, and I've even seen objects moved seemingly by themselves. The timing that's interesting is it must have been solid since it had a shadow. I also live on the second floor, and the backyard is fenced off. Has anyone had similar experiences? What could it have been?